welcome one and all. We miss you, those that are not here. Shout out to our good friends, Ro, and who else are we missing? Kinsen at the moment, Simon. Simon's here, the backstage.
Yeah.
Today we wanted to focus on intentionality, being intentional in our Christian walk and how we express our faith in the day-to-day, in the outside world. So when we talk about this, that value of being intentional, we're talking about it from that point of view of that third circle, which again was the expression of our faith in the outside world. That third circle is about how we live, how we work, how we interact with the others outside. And so this notion or this idea of being intentional, I thought we could have a chat about it. There's a part of it, if you look at it just the opposite of it, when we're not intentional. I think Adrian had this great analogy, and I think, Deb, you might know it, about the oven. Remember about the oven? So there's often things that we do which are just vestiges of things done before. We don't know why they're done, but we just continue to do them. I think an example, a little bit controversial, an example of that would be today's evangelistic events around Christmas. Well, we've always had a Christmas event, so let's do a carols or let's do another Christmas event, which is like a natural thing. Invite our friends along to this Christmas event, and it's what we do, and nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. I think we should have Christmas events, but the idea that be just this thing on repeat versus why are we doing it? What actually would serve? What would be the best way in today's day and age to get people to engage with Christian values or thoughts around Christmas time? Maybe it's to have, rather than come to the church, it's to have other types of festive events, maybe barbecues at home, barbecues in the park, in settings that are more relevant to the environments we find ourselves in today. Post-COVID, call it post-COVID, I don't know, post-modernist. People don't want to be walking into a building, So what's that idea? How do we transport that into a current day and age? How do we be intentional with that idea of trying to witness to our non-Christian family and friends during this festive time, rather than just go about doing what we always have done? So just some brief thoughts on that word, intentional, Deb. I want to ask you any thoughts on this topic of being intentional.
No, great introduction, Danny. It already made me think of some things, and it made me think back to actually quite a number of years ago and Joanne's not in this call, but she's part of our community, and back when we were part of Life Source. I remember when we were both kind of really challenged by the Halloween concept.
That's right. That was cool.
Kids were, young kids, and in America it's massive, and it hasn't been a massive thing in Sydney, but it's growing over the years. It's kind of growing in culture of the whole Halloween thing, and so we're actually quite challenged by that, and wanting to understand Halloween, one from a spiritual point of view, but also wanting to see how we could engage our children and the community in a way that would be that would be a positive thing, and would be something that I guess prizes the things that are good about Halloween, which people like: the community aspect, the dressing up, and the kids being able to have lollies and all the fun stuff. And I just remember that because that was a time, I think, where circumstances and our stage of life led us to want to start being creative and on the forefront of our lives and what we did, and knowing that being part of a church as well and a community, we could actually do something together. And so we went into that dreaming kind of mode. What do we do? What do we want to create? And went through all these different names, and Adrian keeps getting the name wrong because that was one of the first iterations, was Hallowed In, and he keeps calling it Hallowed In, and it's not. It ended up on Heroes and Halos. So let's put that out. So Heroes and Halos, yeah. So we kind of we created this event that went on for about 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row, that really became an event that brought the community inside the church.
I remember that it was hallowed, as in hallowed be thy name, Hallowed In. That was the original name, right? And then it morphed into Heroes and Halos, and you'll send some photos of that. That was awesome. That was just so cool. That's a great example, Deb. I love that.
But it made me think of it because, over this season and these weeks of doing this series of, the inner, middle, and outer circles, it causes us, I think, to want to be more on the forefront of thinking and not just going about our lives and letting life take us over, but more about, what are we intentionally doing in each of our spaces and each of our moments in life, in our family life, our work life, even our hobby life, even the way that we look after ourselves. So I think intentionality is a great one to to think about that. And for this as a recording going out there, I think I'd really love, for days and months and years on, as people listen to this, that it would be something that helps people to keep having, as Christians, a forward-thinking way of doing life and thinking about relationships and everything that we do in life, because we do have the ability to set culture and to change culture and to change through the Holy Spirit so many things, and to be able to kind of make a huge impact in this way. So that's my thoughts on intentionality. I think it's massive, and I love to hear Aids, what you think as well, like in terms of, I think in our family life, intentionality is a big one. But
we can move into some examples, because I think Aids is someone who's embodies that word intentional. He always says, but what's your intention? Like, you're doing this and this and this and this, but what's your intention on behind that? Whether it be whether it be from a business point of view, or even a church point of view, or even a family point of view, like you could start don't do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that, and it's like, well, what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? Like, what's your intention? Let's have a think about that, and then we'll work out what we do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think of intentionality, I guess it's sort of coming back to a point where just working from, principles, and just trying to, I guess be clear. I think firstly, as Christians, what does it actually, mean or look like for us to, as to how our faith actually outworks, in our lives. So that's sort of kind of the question that I'm always trying to answer. And then instead of trying to prescribe actions, like I think often we just think of, okay, well, what do we actually, what are the actions that look like that? But I think, what are the actions that come out of that? And I think often we sort of look at, and sort of just see the actions that people do. And I think for me, I like to try and sort of come back to understanding what are the principles that drive the behaviors. And yes, I mean, I think that's sort of just a little thing that I like to do and apply in the different areas. So, even say with the kids, I don't, I try not to, just tell them what to do, but just to say, look, what are the principles, that they should be thinking about here. And I guess it kind of empowering them, and I think the spirit there is to try to empower people to be able to think for themselves, as opposed to telling people, well, you should just do this. But if they don't understand why they're doing it, then they're not able to then make a decision for themselves.
Yeah, you do that really well. You also do that in business. I know this. So you're rarely someone who's going to say, prescribe, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do that. You want them to have that one of those sort of Rima moments, or a revelation, a wow moment, or a revelation moment of going, oh, I get it. I get what you're asking me now, and I've just realized something, whatever that be, and it guides them from then on. And I think that's the big thing about you, is you want them to become independent, free thinking, able to respond based on a principle. Principle centered, principle valued, first principle basis, not just, oh, now what do I do, Adrian? Now what do I do, Adrian? It didn't quite follow that path. Now what do I do?
There was a point where we were, when we were multiplying, and we're sort of handing over to other leaders, and I remember one of the leaders that we were, handing over the group to, they were saying, okay, well, this is what you guys did. We, had a formula of, the different activities that we did for the Connect group, and that was what he perceived as being the reasons why we grew and how it flourished. And then, so, I was saying, okay, so what's your plan? And then I think he was saying, okay, well, we're just going to do those things. And I said, well, great, but, that's actually, and I don't want you just to do that just for the sake of it. Like, think about, the principles that would driving each of those activities, and what we're trying to achieve in it. And that was in part just really, just trying to understand the why behind the what. So I think if you can always understand the why behind the what, then that helps you to know how to frame the activities and your decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you say that a lot as well. That's another famous phrase of yours: the why behind the what. Being intentional. It's always a big word that you use. I think that you really embody that. This value sort of coming from you, because I think that's a big part of what you see. And I mean, bringing it back to our Christian lives, like, I don't know whether you've got any comments, but we'll go into it. It's just this idea that so often, even in the Bible, how it goes, do not forget this and do not forget that, and don't forget to meet up, or, there's a tendency for us to drift. I think there's a tendency for us to just drift along with the tide. And I love what you were saying there before, Deb. Like, you quite inspired me when you were talking about we want ourselves and Christians to be at the forefront of what it means to be Christian in this day and age, in our day and age today. So, to Adrian's point, don't prescribe. Don't say, well, that means quiet times and read this book, and and none of those things are bad. All of those things are good, right? It's just the point you're making about being intentional is actually something that you need to be. Otherwise, you will drift. You won't be at the forefront. You will be part of yesterday's activities, and you know what I mean? You'll inherit a system of doing things, but you won't be thinking, what's driving the value of this? Why are we doing this? Who are we trying to reach? The example I was giving about the Christmas thing, again, it's not to say Christmas things are bad. I think they're great, but it's just this thing is often it's on autopilot. We're on autopilot as a church and as a body. And we've got to recognize that. I think that if you asked all of us, just graph what you think is the state of the church and the state of Christianity in the world today. Does your graph look like a flat line? Does your graph look like it's like Christianity is on the rise and it's increasing, or is it on the decline? And I know certain places you'd say, well, say for example, different places in the Middle East and even in China, it's actually this Africa as well, like our growing numbers that keep Christianity as a percentage of the population, world's population, going well are those few places where there's great persecution. So Asia, Africa, and even the Middle East. But what for the West? What about our little world? Like, rather than all the way out there, what about our world? What's the state of the church? And I think it's our heart to say, well, we want to see, where we are in our own backyards, thriving and growing, and people becoming more fervent. And I know it's happening already in different pockets everywhere, but it's certainly our heart. So how do we become intentional about that? I've got some questions to ask. I'm just going to get to them.
Danny, I was thinking of just riffing off what you just said then, in terms of the bigger picture as Christians, and if we are in a state of decline, and just knowing that also, as Christianity, gets separated from a lot of the foundations of our society, as we're becoming an increasingly secular society, and our schools, our just generally the laws are being less and less biblically founded. It's really taking all the things that we've assumed in the generations past that we've just inherited no longer exists for the children that we're raising now.